Very good. Nice to see you all here this afternoon. And the things that I'm going to talk about today, they are useful in a number of different ways. It was suggested to me just before I come in here that everybody in their life, they have like two sides. They want a professional life to work. They want to be able to deal with their professional life in a good way. And there's also the private aspect of life, right? You want to be able to deal with the private, with yourself, to feel good about yourself as well. So these two aspects of life, actually, often it seems like they are two different aspects, but the reality is that these are just two sides of the same coin. If you deal with your personal life in the right way, it enhances your professional life. And if you deal with your professional life in the same way, it enhances your personal life. They're not really different. It's all about how to deal with life in a very general sense. And this is really what this is about. Very simple things, but don't underestimate the simple things in life. You may think that what I'm talking, I'm just saying the obvious, and in a way I am saying the obvious, but the obvious often needs to sink in in a deep way, and when the obvious becomes profound and deep inside of each one of us, then it starts to have meaning. And I was reminded of this quite recently. One of my very close university friends, he had some fairly tragic things happening to him. About 6 months ago, his son committed suicide. And of course, after the son committed suicide, I got to hear about this. And when I got to hear about this, I wrote him an email to explain, basically what, from a Buddhist point of view, what this means. And then he thanked me afterwards and said, "Wow, thank you for your wisdom." And then a few weeks ago, about 6 months after his son committed suicide, just to make things really bad, his wife committed suicide, right? So he has had his son and wife committing suicide within 6 months. And for most people, that is really tough. It is really a lot of things happening in one go. So again, I tried to help him out and send him another email telling him about the nature of life and death and all these things. And again, I said some very basic Buddhist things. And again, I was astonished by the response. The response was, "Thank you for your profound wisdom. It's amazing how these things, amazing how you can say this, that these simple little things have such impact." Now his wife, what is interesting about this story is that his wife, she was the CEO of one of the largest banks in Norway, right? She was the very top of the business hierarchy in the whole Norwegian society. And yet, after her son died, she wasn't able to deal with that in a way that she was able to live with it. She felt so distressed by this whole thing that she also ended up committing suicide. And then I realized, just because somebody is very skilled, just because somebody is a very highly acclaimed professional within society, just because somebody is a very good person, she was a very good and very kind-hearted person as well, just because you have those qualities, it doesn't mean that you're able to deal with the difficulties and the hard things in life. And this is what I saw in her. And all I had to do was to say some very simple, to me very obvious things, and that was enough to kind of help them to understand the situation better. What did I say? I said things like, "This too will pass," right? I'm sure you've heard this saying before. It's one of Ajahn Brahmali's favorite saying, "This too will pass." But actually it is incredibly profound. You take it in at the superficial level and you think, yeah, this too will pass, I understand. But you don't really understand. That's the whole point. It is a very profound and deep teaching. And when you understand this in a deep sense, well, first of all, it helps you to deal with things like when somebody commits suicide, because you know that whatever feeling you harbor after a family member commits suicide, that too will pass. But on an even more profound level, it reminds you that life itself is very uncertain, right? Life comes and it goes. So this too will pass reminds you not to expect that things will go the way they do right now forever and ever after. So that's what I said to him. Then I told him, it doesn't matter so much how we die. Life and death comes. It's not how we die. Often there is a lot of stigma associated with suicide, but it's not how we die. It is rather how we live that really matters in the world, right? If we live in a good way and do the right thing, then if we commit suicide or we die in a car accident or in cancer or of old age, that's not really the issue. Have we lived well? And I said, you should rejoice. You had a wonderful wife. life. She did incredibly well in the world. She was well liked by almost everybody. She had a sense of integrity, of morality, despite her high achievements. You should be proud. You shouldn't worry about the fact that she has passed away by committing suicide. Right? Wow, thank you for your profound wisdom. And these things are in many ways so very obvious, but people don't understand very often the obvious things in life. So let me, for that reason, say a few more obvious things to you. I hope you don't mind. And I'll say a few more obvious things, and then afterwards, if you want to ask about other things, please do so. So one of the things about, I think, any life, whether it's business life or ordinary life or whatever it is to get life into perspective, to understand life in the bigger picture. Not just, I understand that as a business people, you get very easily drawn into the business. Business becomes everything, and that becomes your life. Why? Well, because it is a very big part of your life. It demands a lot of attention. It demands a lot of energy, etc., etc. So it draws you in. But be careful, if it draws you in too far and you lose perspective, that is when you can make mistakes. So one of the most important things, and I think this was missing in this friend of mine's life, was the ability to get perspective, to draw back a little bit, stand back and look at life in the big context, in the big picture. And when you see the big picture, and you remind yourself of the big picture, perhaps every single day of your life, then it becomes much easier to do what is right, both in business life and also in your private life. So what do I mean by the big picture? And what I mean by the big picture is that life is a very limited thing. It's very fleeting. We come into this world, we don't know when our time is up, right? So what I mean by perspective is the contemplation of death. Remember, you're going to die, right? I try to tell myself this as much as I can. I too am going to die. It's a very, very powerful contemplation. Suddenly, if you remember that you're going to die, then everything you do, every decision you make is made in that context. You know you're going to die. If you're going to die, let's say that you know that in a week's time you're going to die. Let's say that, or even more closely, like say you know tomorrow you're going to die. What does that mean for your behavior? How are you going to behave as a consequence? And when I look into myself and I ask myself, what will I do if I know I'm going to die? The Buddha said, ideally on your next breath, right? But that's very hard to imagine. But say tomorrow or in a week's time, or whatever you're able to do, what does that do to you? Are you going to start an argument with other people as easily? Are you going to desire the things of this world? What's going to happen in your mind if you remember that you're going to die? And what happens, and this is something you can try for yourself, what happens is that you tend to become more peaceful, right? You tend to become less interested in the things of this world. And when you become less interested in things of this world, you have less attachment, you have less desire, you have less anger and irritation of the things going around you. You get more clarity here, right? You get clarity because you understand what is really important in life, what really matters. You can stand back and you can say, wow, now I understand what is important in life. And then you can make decisions which are much clearer, both for yourself privately, but even, as it happens, also for your business or whatever it is that you are doing here. So this idea of death, of just reminding yourself that you're going to die, is actually something extraordinarily powerful. I met a man a few years ago. He was also of Sri Lankan origin. He lives in Australia now, but he was of Sri Lankan origin. And he told me that every day when he was a psychologist, and he told me every day when he leaves his house, he reminds himself, today I could die. And because he reminded himself of that, every day he left his family in a good way, right? He said goodbye to his children, his wife, in a good way, because he knew I may not see them again later on. So this is a very powerful way, a very simple but useful way of using that death contemplation. The same thing if you are a manager in a company. You know, you may never see your employees again. This may be the last time you see them. You could die on the way back from work today. What does that mean? It means that you have a bit more time, a bit more balance in your mind when you deal with the people around you. Whether it's family, whether it's employees, whether it's just an ordinary person in the street, whoever it is, it puts things into perspective and you remind yourself of this. So death contemplation can be very, very powerful. I'm going to put this in even more perspective for you, just to allow me to elaborate a little bit, because this I found very useful in my own life, and my feeling is always, if it's useful for me, it's probably useful for other people as well. And this is the Buddha. The Buddha reminds us that, from a Buddhist point of view, there isn't just this life, but life then continues on into the future. So this life is like this tiny sliver, right? This tiny sliver right here goes on into the past. You don't know how far into the past. And then it goes on into the future. You have no idea how far into the future. But if this is true, that all we have here is this tiny little sliver, that's all we see, and that's all we know about. But the reality is much vaster than that. Then how are you going to invest your time? Are you going to invest your time that only deals with this particular sliver of time right now? Or are you going to invest your time in such a way that it actually affects the whole big picture of lives also into the future? Now this is a Buddhist point of view, so it only really, if you don't believe in rebirth, well, then it becomes a bit more difficult. But if you have an idea of the idea of rebirth, it becomes incredibly meaningful. People sometimes ask me, why do we believe in rebirth anyway? What difference does it make? And the reality, it makes enormous difference. If you only focus on this life, you tend to just invest in this life, right? This is where you invest all your energy and all your efforts, in your status, in your belongings, in your relationships. Everything becomes focused on this life. If you remember the bigger thing here, then you focus on the investment into this bigger period. What is that investment? Is investment in the mind, investment in how we deal with the world, how we act in the world, whether we act with anger or with metta, with loving kindness, whether we act with understanding or compassion, or we act with cruelty and ruthlessness, whether all of these things come from that bigger picture view. If you have the bigger picture view, it changes how you invest your time. And it's just as if a very easy way to understand this is to understand if you are renting a house, right? You rent a house, it's only, say, for a short period of time, for 6 months, right? How much time, how much money, how much of yourself are you going to invest in a house that you are renting from somebody else and you have to give back in 6 months? Not that much, right? Maybe a little bit to make it look nice. You're not going to refurbish the whole house at your expense if you're renting it from somebody else, right? And this is the point. This life is limited. Everything in this life is borrowed. We're borrowing all this stuff, right? Even our body is borrowed. We have it for a while, we've got to give it up. Everything else too is borrowed. And because it's borrowed, please don't invest too much in borrowed goods. Invest in the stuff which actually has a lasting impact into the future. So this is number one. This is just a little bit about death contemplation. The Buddha he said death contemplation is incredibly important for everybody. He said literally everybody. And because of that, I think it can be a very useful tool to remind us what actually matters in life. And if you do that death contemplation in the right way, and it leads to a sense of clarity in your mind, a sense of clarity about what is right and what is wrong, about how to make decisions in life, then it is going in the right way here. But the second thing I want to talk about is actually how to make decisions. Okay, you get a bit of clarity from doing things like death contemplation, but more generally speaking, how do we make decisions in life? And if you are in a position of responsibility, making decisions is one of those very important things, right? So I'm going to tell you a few ways of how to make decisions. And the first one, this is Ajahn Brahm's way, right? Ajahn Brahm is my teacher in Australia, and he is a bit cheeky. That's why I was smiling just now. I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I thought, and Ajahn Brahm says, well, if you're going to make a decision, you take a coin, right? A coin has heads and tails, right? And you say, decision A or decision B, right? This way or that way. So you flip the coin, land in your palm. If it's tails, it's A. If it's heads, it's B. You look, tails. Oh no, I didn't really want to do that, right? This is how you make a decision. You don't actually make the decision by flipping the coin. You make the decision based on the reaction that you have when you see the result. So if you see tails, didn't really like that, okay, then you do heads instead. So So this is one cheeky way of making a decision. But I want to take it a bit further than that, because sometimes that doesn't work. And one of the most important ways of making decision, and it was interesting, I was reading somewhere, maybe it was some management, maybe it was just a newspaper article on management, I can't remember, but somebody had done some research on how CEOs, or not the CEOs, anybody in a position of management, I think, how they make decisions, and who are the people who are most successful in making the right decisions in life. That was one of the factors that was made, that was kind of considered. And they found that the people who make the best decisions, they are the ones that go with a gut feeling. Right? They are the ones that make the best decisions. It sounds counterintuitive. You think, oh, the people that analyze the most, right, get all the analysis right, and they are the ones that make the best decisions. No, the very best managers of the very kind of biggest companies, or whatever it was, or the best people, they follow their gut decision, their intuition, right? And then they use the analysis to back up the gut, the gut instinct, right? So that's what analysis is about. It's about backing up the gut instinct. And this is, life is often like that, isn't it? We are creatures who feel. We feel things. And because we feel things, feeling is an incredibly important part of life. And we are driven by feelings. Because we are driven by feelings, gut instinct and emotions are often more important than rational analysis. Of course, I'm not saying that there is no scope for rational analysis. Of course there is. But very often it is the gut feeling that is most important. So how can we trust our gut feeling? How do we know that the gut feeling is right? And this becomes a very important issue. If you're going to go with your gut feelings and you trust those gut feelings in yourself, maybe because you have a past history of success or whatever, the way to trust your gut feeling is to know the state of your mind while that gut feeling is there. If your state of mind is not quite right, if there is a sense of desire there, a sense of aversion, a sense of confusion, a sense of you don't really know what's going on, then your gut instinct is likely to be, or quite possibly, going to be wrong. If your mind is clear, right, you have just been having a nice meditation or whatever, and mind has a sense of clarity inside of it, you feel that you're not driven by any kind of desire, any kind of negativity or any kind of confusion, then that is when your gut instinct is reliable. This is something the Buddha says in the suttas. When you are free of defilements in the mind, that is when you can remember the events and things that happened a long time ago. That is when your mind has clarity about these things, and it's easy to do what is right. So this is one of the most important things. If you're going to make a decision, always make a decision when you have clarity of mind. If you haven't got clarity of mind, procrastinate. Just wait. One of the kind of basic kind of management techniques is procrastination, apparently. You procrastinate as much as you possibly can. I think it was another, because I've studied business myself, actually. There was a professor at UCLA, University of California in Los Angeles, who said that procrastination is one of the most undervalued management techniques. You just wait as long as you possibly can before you make a decision, and certainly don't make a decision until you have a sense of clarity about it. So this is number one, wait for clarity. Number two, how to make decisions. Remember what is important in life, what really matters. So what is important according to the Buddha's teaching here? And what is important according to the Buddha's teaching is that we are improving in good qualities and going down in bad qualities, right? And you can apply this to yourself. You can apply it to the excuse me. You can apply it to the people around you. What is it that in the long run is going to lead to an improvement in the good qualities? But apply it especially to yourself, because remind yourself what is really important in life. What is important in life is how I was talking about before, right? When you die and you look back upon your life, what is it that you're going to remember? What you're going to remember is how you acted, what kind of person you were, whether you had a sense of kindness in the world, whether you had a sense of understanding of the people around you, whether you were a peaceful and good-hearted person. This is what you're going to die on your death. This is what you're going to remember on your deathbed. This is what matters. So if you think about this now when you make a decision so that you know that this decision in the long run is going to lead to more positive states inside of you and less negative states. And then you're building up a sense of a personality and a person and habits in your life that actually lead to something that you will feel very good about when eventually you have to pass away from this life. It's a very powerful technique. I use this all the time when I decide what I'm going to do. Should I travel to Sri Lanka or not? It's not obvious whether I should do that, but then I consult with other people or whatever, and I ask, should I undertake this? And then I look inside myself, will it lead to an improvement in my good qualities and a reduction in the bad ones? And the answer is, well, if I do it in the right way, if I do it with a sense of kindness and compassion, with the idea of doing service to other people, yes, it will lead to good states and a decline in the bad ones. So you do that. When I decide whether I'm going to stay in this monastery or that monastery, when I decide whether I'm going to be a Buddhist or not, right? Am I going to be a Buddhist? Am I going to be something else? The decision is based on the idea it's going to be for an improvement in my good qualities and a decline in the bad ones. And everything in life can be based on that very simple decision. So that's how I make decisions in my life. So keep these things in mind, right? Tossing the coin, number one, can be very, very handy if you're in a hurry or whatever. Number two, remember the clarity of the mind, and remember that what really matters in life, the improvement of your personal qualities. So that is how we can actually deal with these things. But to actually achieve that clarity of mind, to be able to have enough clarity, to be able to see what is right, and to trust your gut feeling, there are a few other things that you can do to help you with that. And one of those things is to remember, you can always use a little bit of meditation in life. It doesn't mean that you have to kind of sit down for hours every day. I'm absolutely sure many of you are very, very busy as you are. You don't actually have time for that. But even if you just sit a little bit, and I'm sure you noticed that before, just by sitting back for 10 minutes, even if your mind is rushing around, right? Even if you're thinking about all kind of stuff, still you feel more peaceful afterwards than you felt when you started out. So just a little bit of meditation, just to allow yourself to kind of put the brakes on a little bit, not allow the mind to kind of spin out of control quite so much, can often be enough to give you that little bit of extra clarity to make sure that you actually make better decisions in ordinary life. And I've heard some beautiful stories. I mean, often you have to decide yourself what is the best way for doing this. I don't really, as a monk, my schedule is obviously very different from yours. But I've heard many stories of how people do this. And one of the techniques is every hour, you sit down and you close your eyes for 1 or 2 minutes, and all you do is just allow everything just to kind of become more peaceful within 1 or 2 minutes every hour, right? Just to calm yourself a little bit down, so you get a little bit more clarity, especially if you feel that things are kind of, you're getting a little bit stressed or you're getting a bit restless or whatever, then it's always a very good time to do that. That is one way of calming things down. Another way, this is a more radical solution, right? This was apparently a lawyer in London. Ajahn Brahmali told me this story. Maybe you heard this one before. He said there was a lawyer in London, and he had this one cupboard in the room, in his lawyer's room, right? His cupboard against the wall, and nobody really knew what it was for, right? It was just kind of sitting there. He never really seemed to go in there. But this cupboard was a cupboard where he would meditate. So every day, what he would do in the middle of the day sometime, he had a certain period, half an hour or whatever it was, I think it was about half an hour, and he would get into this cupboard, right, probably in his suit and everything, get into this cupboard. In London, people are really kind of properly dressed, in the old days they had bowler hats and all those kind of things, and he would actually get into this cabinet, and he would sit down, and he would get his secretary to lock the door, right? Okay, let me out in half an hour. And he would sit in this cabinet, which is dark, it was quiet, and he would sit there for half an hour doing his daily meditation practice. And the idea, again, is just to recharge your batteries. And when you come out of a half an hour's meditation, you feel recharged in another way. So this is what meditation should really be about. It has two at least two, many very great qualities. It makes your decision making more powerful because you have more clarity of mind, but also it is a personal thing. You just feel better about yourself when you have more clarity. You feel better about yourself when you feel more relaxed, right? It actually also has this dual thing, and this is everything you do in life. If it is according to Buddhist principles, it always has both aspects to it. It's better for yourself, and it is better for the other people in your life, whether it's people in your company, people in your family, or whatever it is. And you don't have to do very much. A little bit is enough. And then what you can do is you can also expand that to anybody, if you are in a position of management, to expand that to the employees in the company. This is becoming very common now, especially in the West. And they say, people often hire people, they don't hire monks so much, but they hire other people who teach the staff about mindfulness meditation. And it sounds perhaps very cynical, and the reason they do that because then it increases productivity, right? So people get very cynical about that. What? You just want me to meditate so I can increase productivity? So you have to be careful how you sell this thing here. And of course the point is, it doesn't just increase productivity. It also increases the personal and subjective well-being of every employee. So it's a win-win situation. You have to be very careful how we phrase these things, otherwise people become cynical about what we're doing here. So if you have that in your company, maybe you have a place, a room where people can meditate, maybe you can invite a meditation teacher to teach those who are interested in these things, you're actually often enhancing the well-being of the people and also the productivity of the company. I think I can't remember now the exact results, but I think if you have 15 or 20, I can't remember the exact numbers, 15 or 20 minutes of meditation increases the productivity overall in the company, even though you take that time out to actually do these things. So very useful and simple technique on how to enhance one's own life and also the life of the company as such. Okay, so maybe I will stop there. Yeah, I think I will stop there. We can maybe go on to some more Q&A and discussion and things. I'm not sure exactly what what kind of things that you are interested in talking about. Since they don't me just talking on, I think this might be a good time to stop. So let's move on to next stage. Yeah.